Alright guys, welcome to our new world. We are doing this online, so this is Monday's lesson. It is a 30-point homework, and yes, of course, you do need to be taking notes. We are going to do a quick review of two things before we get started. The good news for you is everything we're doing on this video, you have already done. Whether it's the solving, doing cross multiplication that you practiced last week, or the two reminders that I'm going to give you. So all of this is practicing old skills. So the first reminder is restrictions. Remember that when we started dealing with rational equations, we identified restrictions, and the restrictions were any x value that would make the denominator equal 0. Okay, if there is only an x or a number times x in the denominator, like either one of those, then our restriction is just x cannot equal 0. If, though, we have a plus or a minus in the denominator, we have to actually solve that. What x value would make x plus 3 equal to 0? And the good news is we can always just take the opposite of whatever that is. So x minus 7. So x can't equal the opposite of that, which would be positive 7. Because positive 7 minus 7 is 0. And over here, negative 3 plus 3 is 0. So hopefully that is enough of a refresher for you to remember what restrictions are. I am going to the second reminder is how we solve quadratics. So remember that we always want to first look to see if there's a GCF. Sometimes that's going to be enough. So if we've got the quadratic 2x squared plus 4, we have a GCF of 2, so that's going to give me x squared plus 2 in the parentheses. Or we may have 3x squared minus 9x. Here we have both a 3 and an x in common. 3x squared divided by 3x is x. Negative 9x divided by 3x is just a 3. So remember, those are the two ways it could look if we have a binomial and we need to factor a GCF out. So if you need to pause here so that you can look and see what I did to refresh yourself, do that. I'm going to go ahead and erase that, and we're going to look at a trinomial real quick. Okay, so here we have a trinomial. So when we have a trinomial, we are going to look for a GCF. I do not have anything in common with those three terms. So I am going to go ahead and I'm going to break it down into two binomials. Remember that the only thing that can give us x squared is x times x. The only thing, or when I look at that plus, it tells me that my signs are going to be the same. I'm going to look there to remember that they are both going to be pluses. Then I'm going to look at my 6. Just a minute, let me erase some of those arrows. Now I'm going to look at that 6 and look for factors. Which factor will add together, because my signs are the same, which factors will add together to give me 5? It's going to be 2 and 3, and it does not matter where I put them. Now remember, to solve, I need to go ahead and state that x is equal to negative 2, because again, we are looking for what makes that 0. And here, x is equal to negative 3. So I want to be sure that we remember what that looks like when we're solving a quadratic. Now on those GCFs, remember that if we get to, this is a new example, if we get to 2x equals x plus 4, I'm just making up an example, so don't get confused. It has nothing to do with the trinomial. If we have an x out in front, that is going to be x equals 0. This binomial is just like we normally do. X is equal to that number, but the opposite sign. So x equals -4. All right, let's do one more example. If I've got 2 times x plus 4, now notice this 2 does not have an x with it. If this value or this term out here does not have a variable, we ignore it when we are solving. We are only going to focus where there are x's. So here, that solution would only be x equals -4. I'm going through this quickly because, again, this is a reminder. We've already done this. So we are going to go ahead. I'm going to do 2 examples with you. Remember, if you get confused as you're doing your homework, you can text me a picture of the work you've done. Remember to attempt it first, and then I can tell you where you're going wrong or if you're doing it right and you just need confidence. All right, let's go to our first example. Okay, here's our first example, and the first thing we want to do are restrictions. Remember, we always do restrictions on the original problem. So I'm going to go ahead and put a parenthesis under here, and remember that we are wanting to put parentheses, I'm sorry, that is not a parenthesis, that is a number 1. Yes, it's late, guys, and I'm trying to get this done for you. Put a 1 under any whole numbers, and we are going to put parentheses around any binomials. Now, looking at denominators, the only denominator I need to worry about is this one, because it's the only one with an x. So x plus 5, what would make x plus 5 equal 0? And if the x was -5, -5 plus 5 equals 0. Remember, you can always come over here and do x plus 5 equals 0 and solve it. Subtract 5 from both sides, so x equals -5. But remember, for a restriction, we want to put that line through the equals. I'm going to be erasing this, so if you need it, pause now and write that down so that you will remember it. Okay, so we are going to cross multiply just like we did all last week. So I'm going to go through this piece quickly because you do know what to do. Now, this is a -2, so watch out for that. I have made that mistake a couple of times already. So 1 times 12 is 12. Do not forget to bring down that equal sign. That's the mistake I kept seeing this last week. We're going to distribute. So -2 times x gives me -2x. -2 times a5 is -10. Yes, guys, it's late. Bear with me. Okay, at this point, I only have an x right here. So I'm going to bring my equal sign down again. And I am going to move my -10 over by adding 10 to both sides. So I get a 22 over here and a -2x here. So now I'm going to divide both sides by -2. And you all know, if this is going too fast, you may pause and look at each step individually. The majority of you are picking up speed on this, though. So since this is the exact same thing we've been doing all week long, I wanted to get through that quickly because we're already at 9 minutes. Okay, so I've got a solution of x equals -11. Remember what we were doing at the end of all of our problems last week? We were checking. So here's our check. I'm going to take the original equation. Oops. And I'm going to plug in my -11. And now I'm going to simplify. 12 over -11 plus 5 is -6. I know that's not very lined up. And 12 divided by -6 is actually -2. So this checks out. It does work. So my solution, and we're going to start calling it a real solution, is x equals -11. Okay, so remember, you need to have the math, you need to have the restriction, you need to have the check, and you need to tell me if it's a real solution or not. You may be saying, well, of course it's a real solution because that's what we've got. That's where we're about to learn something new. Okay, pause if you need to. Be sure you've got all that, and then hit